In the complexity of the human experience, there exists a place where the sacred and the profane, the most primal instinct and the deepest emotion, not only coexist, they dance together, as if inseparable. This place is sexuality, and within it there are acts that, more than others, seem to carry the weight of millennia, of silence, taboo, and fascination. But instead of just observing from a distance, try looking inward. How many times have you asked yourself why certain moments of intimacy, especially those that society avoids or hides, awaken such intense feelings within you? Why can a gesture be, at the same time, the height of connection for some and a source of deep disgust or shame for others? What is really at stake when the mouth meets the other's body in such a primal way? Because here's the point that many don't have the courage to say: the act of oral sex, often trivialized or wrapped in a mix of curiosity and embarrassment, is not merely a technique of pleasure or an item on the menu of intimacy. Sexuality can be, and often is, the rawest and most honest stage where your psyche enacts its deepest dramas, the place where your soul cries out for unconditional acceptance or drowns in the icy waters of shames that aren't always yours. It's a brutal mirror of your most intimate relationship, the one you have with yourself. Allow the ancestral wisdom of depth psychology to guide us. Carl Jung, a master at unraveling the mysteries of the human soul, reminded us that, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. And what so many of us keep in the unconscious about our sexuality, about our capacity to give and receive pleasure and acceptance in such vulnerable ways, is precisely what secretly dictates the quality and depth of our most intimate connections. In this journey that begins now, we will dive fearlessly into the waters of the psychology of oral sex. You're about to discover why this act is a portal to understanding the roots of your oldest shame, the hidden power in your most exposed vulnerability, and the transformative power of an acceptance so radical it can redefine your relationship with pleasure, with the other, and fundamentally, with who you are. And we will do this entirely through the penetrating lens of Carl Jung's psychology, using his concepts to illuminate the basements and altars of this human experience. After all, as Jung himself might warn us, the quest for self-understanding is not a pastime for the faint of heart. He might say something like, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens." And this video is an invitation to awaken, to look into the dynamics of oral sex and discover what it has to reveal about your most secret desires and your deepest needs for connection and healing. Prepare to discover keys that can unlock doors within you, revealing inner landscapes you never even knew existed. With each chapter, a new layer will be unveiled, a new piece of the intricate puzzle of your own psyche, and the nature of human intimacy will be placed. The question is, are you ready to see the image that will emerge? The paradox in every mouth, more than pleasure, a matter of the psyche. We have arrived at the territory where masks fall away, and here we are, ready to uncover one of the most intimate acts, and, why not say it, one of the most charged with meaning in the human experience: oral sex. Just mentioning the term might spark a myriad of thoughts, sensations, and perhaps even a slight discomfort, right? For some, it's synonymous with supreme pleasure, with transcendent connection. For others, it's a minefield of anxieties, expectations, or even repulsion. But why? Why can something so specific evoke such a vast spectrum of human reactions? Most discussions stop there, at the surface of physical pleasure, the techniques, the preferences. But we, following the tracks of depth psychology, and especially with the compass of Carl Jung, are invited to ask, what else is at stake? Is it just about nerve endings and biology? Or, as with so many other aspects of our lives, is the body merely the stage where our psyche enacts its most secret dramas? Consider the fundamental paradox that resides here: the mouth, an organ we use to nourish ourselves, to communicate with the world in an articulate and respectable way, to express our highest thoughts. And yet, in oral sex, this same mouth meets the most intimate, the most secret parts of another, often culturally and secretly for many of us, associated with what is low, animal, or even dirty. What strange alchemy is this that can transform what would be unthinkable in one context into the pinnacle of intimacy in another? In other words, why can the same act be seen as degrading or sacred depending on who's involved and what's really happening beneath the skin? For psychology, and Carl Jung would certainly agree, there are no empty coincidences in human behavior. If an act like oral sex holds so much power, the power to connect, to repel, to heal, to shame, it's because it touches on strings that are very, very old and deep within our psyche. It's not just an action, it's a symbol, loaded with meanings that we often don't even consciously understand. Oral sex is like a dream. It has a surface story, but beneath it lie hidden messages about who we are, what we fear, and what we most deeply desire. That's why a purely physiological investigation will always be incomplete. It might tell us the how of pleasure, but it will never reach the why of its psychological intensity, its existential weight. Jung taught us that the human psyche longs for meaning, for integration, and acts that confront us with our inner opposites, the high and the low, the pure and the impure, the acceptable and the rejected, are golden opportunities for this process of integration. When we engage in something that challenges our ideas of right and wrong, or clean and dirty, within a safe space of intimacy, we're actually giving our mind a chance to make peace with parts of ourselves we may have learned to hide or even hate. Next, we're going to peel back the layers of this meaning together. We'll explore how the shadow of ancestral shame hovers over our sexuality, and how oral sex can be a battlefield or a peace treaty with that shame. We'll explore how deeply it makes us vulnerable, and the power of connection that can emerge from that. And finally, we'll see how this journey of radical acceptance can lead us to a more honest and liberating encounter with ourselves. But before we can reach healing and liberation, we need the courage to look at the source of the wound, to understand the transformative power of an act that symbolizes such deep acceptance. We must first confront head-on the ghosts it challenges. Why is it that something that can be so transcendently intimate often grows from soil seeded with guilt, internalized disgust, and social taboo? Where does this shadow that hangs over the body and its rawest pleasures come from? The answer begins in our most distant past, in the first messages we received about who we are and what is acceptable, and that's where we're going next. The weight of shame and the primordial yearning for acceptance. Have you ever wondered why, even living in an era of sexual freedom, we still speak in hushed tones about certain parts of the body and certain intimate acts, as if they were something shameful or even dirty? Where does that inner voice come from that judges, that hesitates, that sometimes keeps us from fully embracing our being and our pleasure? That feeling wasn't born with you. It was carefully built, brick by brick. From a very early age, before we even had words to describe it, we absorbed the unspoken rules of the world. We learned that there are parts of our body that are clean, acceptable, worthy of being seen and touched in public. And we learned, painfully, that there are others, our most intimate parts, that must be hidden, silenced, often associated with something shameful or impure. Society teaches us to keep our distance, to police our touch, to mask raw desire. The spontaneity with which a child explores their own body and the world is gradually replaced by a tangled web of can and cannot. And the mouth, which is the gateway to our first connection with the world, nourishment, the first kiss from a mother, the first words, is taught to be the vehicle of what's respectable, what's public. Meanwhile, our genitals, the source of life and our most instinctual pleasure, are relegated to the shadows of the private, the secret, often burdened with the weight of taboo. So what happens in the psyche when these two spheres, the public and the secret, the noble and the instinctual, come together so directly and so raw as they do in oral sex? Why is this encounter so potent, capable of generating both deep discomfort and profound liberation? It's because beneath all these layers of conditioning, of learned shame, lies an almost forgotten memory. a yearning that pulses from our very first breath. Carl Jung spoke of the importance of archetypal experiences, and the need for unconditional acceptance is perhaps one of the most fundamental. Imagine, if we were lucky, our first moments in this world. Every part of us, from head to toe, was seen as adorable, perfect, worthy of tenderness. There was no judgment, only acceptance. This lost paradise of total acceptance leaves an indelible mark on our soul. We want, desperately, to feel that again. But adult life presents us with a very different reality, doesn't it? We are forced to build a persona, as Jung would call it, a social mask that we present to the world, polished, controlled, acceptable. We hide our most wild desires, our unmentionable fantasies, our vulnerabilities. We live a split, the public self, seeking approval, and the secret self, yearning to be seen and loved in its entirety, with all its imperfections. We're caught in this dichotomy between what we show and what we really are inside. And it's exactly here that oral sex, in its deep psychology, enters like a hurricane. It doesn't ask the persona for permission. It invites the most secret, most vulnerable, most animal part of ourselves to step out of the shadows and be seen, be touched, be accepted in its rawest state. But how can an act that for many still carries the stigma of the dirty or the forbidden have the power to offer such redemption? What force is this that can transform shame into a passport to the most radical intimacy? If we're so deeply marked by shame and the need to hide parts of ourselves, how is it possible that, in certain encounters with certain people, that barrier can be shattered so spectacularly? What kind of magic, or better yet, what profound psychological alchemy happens when mutual trust and desire turns something that once seemed unthinkable into one of the most liberating and intense acts two human beings can experience? How does taboo become ecstasy? The answer lies in the courage to be vulnerable and in the incredible human capacity to create refuges of acceptance. And it's this transformation that we're going to explore next. The alchemy of intimacy, vulnerability, surrender, and the transgression that liberates. If we carry so much shame and that almost childlike longing to be accepted, why is it that, suddenly, with certain people, all of it seems to simply vanish? What mysterious force comes into play and transforms what could be a minefield of embarrassment into the pinnacle of human connection? Have you ever felt that switch flip? That instant when fear retreats and a deep permission takes hold? The answer lies in what depth psychology calls the authentic encounter. It's the presence of the right person. And what defines this right person? It's not an ideal of perfection, but someone in whose presence you feel a rare and precious emotional safety. You know that feeling of being able to take a deep breath, of not having to perform, of sensing that your darkest corners don't scare them, but perhaps even intrigue them, and are welcomed. It's in this fertile ground, where judgment gives way to curiosity and genuine affection, that the magic begins. Think about the vulnerability that an act like oral sex demands. To expose such intimate parts of your body, to surrender to pleasure, or to the act of giving pleasure in such a raw way, it's a leap of faith. It's as if you were handing a piece of your soul into the other's hands, or mouth, hoping, with your heart on your sleeve, that it will be treated with reverence. And when that trust is honored, when what you offer, in all your humanity, is received with enthusiasm and tenderness, something inside of us begins to break open. The old armor of shame starts to give way. This is where transgression becomes liberation. What is erotic with the right person can seem disgusting with the wrong one. Analytical psychology, and Carl Jung would certainly explore this dynamic, understands that eroticism often feeds on the breaking of barriers, on going beyond what is permitted. When you and your partner decide together to cross a line that society, or your own internal voices, deemed taboo, you're not just seeking pleasure. You're creating a private universe, a secret and powerful we. You're building, as that text put it, a refuge of mutual acceptance, where the rules of the outside world lose some of their hold. Have you ever found yourself in that place, where a shared secret, a daring moment lived by two, seemed to seal a bond that no words could ever truly describe? In this space of trust and shared transgression, the dynamics of power and surrender also take on new meaning. Far from being oppressive, they can become a dance. The surrender of the one who receives isn't passive submission, but a deep trust. The act of the one who gives isn't servility, but can be an expression of devotion, of generous power, of an intense desire to provide pleasure and validation. Of course, this dance is only beautiful and transformative when there is awareness, clear communication, and above all, enthusiastic and vibrant consent from both sides. Without that, the magic breaks, and vulnerability can become dangerous. But when these elements are present, trust, welcomed vulnerability, shared transgression, full consent, what was merely a physical act is transformed. Shame transmutes into acceptance, distance becomes fusion. Fear gives way to a freedom rarely experienced. It's a true alchemy of intimacy. This connection so intense, which seems to break through years of conditioning, goes far beyond physical attraction. If so much is being transformed in this moment, what kind of silent, yet profoundly powerful messages are being exchanged in this act of surrender and acceptance? What is the mouth, in touching the other's body in such an intimate and, for many, forbidden way, truly communicating to the psyche, to the soul of both the giver and the receiver? The secret language of the soul, symbolism, and the end of loneliness. If trust and vulnerability can transform a taboo into a portal to radical intimacy, as we've seen, the question that now pulses is, what exactly is being communicated in that sacred space that opens between two people? When words fall silent and bodies speak so raw and directly through oral sex, what secret messages is the soul exchanging? Have you ever had the feeling that, in certain moments of surrender, something much deeper than physical pleasure was happening? Carl Jung reveals to us that this act is one of the most potent forms of symbolic communication there is. Think about the mouth. It's the organ through which we've been nourished since our very first day of life, through which we articulate our truths, our fears, our dreams. It's the portal of the kiss, of the word that comforts or inflames. In many ways, it's our most public face, the self that we present to the world. Now, imagine that same mouth, this center of your conscious expression, choosing voluntarily to honor, to celebrate the most hidden, most vulnerable parts of the other's body, parts that society has often taught us to see as lesser or even unworthy. Have you ever paused to feel the impact of that choice? The implicit message there is devastatingly powerful. I see everything in you, from your heights to your deepest roots, and not only do I accept it, I desire it, and I revere every inch of your being. This goes far beyond simple kindness. It's an act that, symbolically, can represent a form of devotion, almost a ritual of worshipping the raw, naked humanity of the partner. Have you ever felt, in giving or receiving, as if you were part of something that transcended the carnal? A kind of silent prayer, a celebration of the other's imperfect beauty and the preciousness of their body. This sensation is not a romantic fantasy. It's your psyche recognizing the depth of what's happening. For Jung, symbols are the language of the soul, and oral sex, in this context, becomes a living hieroglyph, crying out, "You are desirable, you are valued, you are sacred to me," in your entirety. And what happens when this message is received, not just by the skin, but by the soul? The reference text we analyzed at the beginning mentioned that erotic ecstasy is, more precisely, just emotional relief. What a shocking and liberating revelation. How many times, behind the search for orgasm, is there really a desperate search for this relief? The relief of being seen in your wicked and obscene corners, as the text put it, and instead of disgust or judgment, to find an enthusiastic endorsement. Think of some moment in your life when you felt profoundly alone, afraid that no one would ever truly accept you if they knew all your secrets, all your flaws. Now, imagine an act that, without needing a single word, communicates, "I see your shadows, your wounds, your unacceptable parts, and yes, I welcome them. I desire them. You are welcome here, exactly as you are." Can you feel the wave of peace that such a level of acceptance could bring to that small place inside of you that has always felt unworthy? That's why the pleasure of oral sex, when imbued with this awareness and mutual surrender, is so rich and meaningful. It strikes directly at the root of one of our most universal pains, existential loneliness, the paralyzing fear that we are not, at the core, lovable or acceptable. It's not just a pleasurable physical sensation, no matter how intense it is. At its deepest essence, it's about psychology, visceral acceptance, and the powerful promise of an end to loneliness. A promise that, yes, it's possible to be seen in your entirety and still be deeply desired and loved. If this act carries so much power, of acceptance, of healing loneliness, of validating our truest selves, the big question is, how can we take that transformation beyond the intimate moment? How can we sustain that feeling of being seen and accepted to create relationships that are more sincere, more loving, not just with those beside us, but most importantly, with ourselves, with our bodies, and with our own desire? The answer lies in recovering our wholeness, and it's precisely toward that liberating reconnection that we're going next. The reclaimed body, psychology, freedom, and the integration of the self. If an act of oral intimacy can carry within it the power to communicate such visceral acceptance, to connect us with another in such a symbolic and profound way, what is the lasting echo of that experience in our psyche? How can we take that transformative experience beyond the bedroom, into the fabric of our lives, into the way we relate to our own bodies and desires? Have you ever imagined what might happen if that radical acceptance wasn't just a fleeting moment, but a new way of being? The first great liberation happens in the territory of our own body. Think about that subtle guilt, that almost imperceptible shame we've so often learned to associate with pleasure, especially sexual pleasure that defies the norms. Now, imagine that armor beginning to dissolve, when you experience repeatedly in a space of trust that your body in its entirety, with its smells, its fluids, its most secret parts, is not just tolerated, but actively desired and celebrated. Something changes fundamentally. That critical inner voice starts to lose its grip. You begin to reclaim your right to pleasure, to your sexuality, without apologizing for it. It's as if the gaze of acceptance from the other, as Carl Jung might explain with his concept of projection and introjection, starts to be internalized. If someone you trust, someone you desire, reflects back to you an image of worth and desirability, even in your rawest aspects, you gradually begin to see yourself through this new mirror. That old image, distorted by shame, begins to be replaced by one that is more loving and whole. Have you noticed how a truly accepting gaze from someone important can recalibrate how you feel about yourself, as if you start to see yourself with more kindness? Here we touch on one of Jung's most powerful legacies, the journey of integrating the shadow. Remember, the shadow is not evil. It's everything we've hidden from ourselves and the world out of fear or shame. For many, raw sexuality, forbidden desires, the parts of the body deemed impure, they reside in that shadow. What happens then when an act like oral sex, performed with consciousness and consent, brings these shadowy parts into the light of mutual acceptance? It's not a descent into depravity, as some might fear. On the contrary, from the perspective of depth psychology, it's a courageous step toward wholeness. It's saying yes to all parts of yourself. It's the freedom to be authentic in intimacy, no masks, no performance. When this kind of connection and acceptance becomes a genuine experience, and ideally a recurring one within a relationship based on respect, the impact on self-esteem and emotional security can be immense. It creates a virtuous cycle. Acceptance generates safety. Safety allows for more vulnerability. Vulnerability deepens connection, and connection reinforces acceptance. It's a powerful antidote to that existential loneliness we spoke about. Thus, oral sex, stripped of its caricatures and misunderstandings and understood through the lens of psychology, reveals itself not as a duty or a mere technique, but as a profound possibility. A possibility for encounter, for healing, for soul-level communication, and the celebration of the human being in all their complex, wonderful totality. Always, of course, when traveled with absolute respect, mutual desire, and vibrant consent. We've come a long way together, haven't we? From internalized shame to the possibility of radical acceptance, from silent taboo to the secret language of the soul. And what emerges from all this is a simple yet profoundly transformative truth about what we're really seeking in intimacy and in life. So, together, we've dived into the depths of the human psyche, exploring how an act of intimacy like oral sex can be a surprising mirror for our oldest fears, our deepest-seated shames, and, thankfully, our indomitable capacity for healing and authentic connection. We've seen that beneath the physical lies a silent language of the soul, clamoring for acceptance. The journey to understand yourself, as Carl Jung taught us, is never-ending, but every glimpse of awareness is a step toward wholeness. And after everything we've uncovered here about the psychology of surrender, vulnerability, and radical acceptance, the question I'd like to leave you with is, what small shame or old taboo about your body, your pleasure, or your way of connecting do you feel, from today forward, a little more ready to question, maybe even to transform into a path to truly loving and accepting yourself? You don't need to have all the answers right now, but if this conversation has stirred something in you, a spark of recognition, a desire to explore your intimacy with more awareness and less judgment, I'd love for you to share that seed. Leave a comment below, maybe a simple, "I choose acceptance," or "My journey to wholeness begins now." Seeing your reflection is what gives meaning to this work and strengthens our community of seekers. If this content resonated with you, if it shed some light on questions that may have been hidden in the shadows, please show your support. Like this video, because that helps us reach more people who might benefit from this message. Share it with those you believe need to hear it. And of course, if you value this quest for self-knowledge and deeper connections, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you don't miss anything to come. This space is more than just a channel. It's an ongoing invitation to your own transformation. I'll see you in the next video.